Superman's arch nemesis has been a big deal for nearly a century, remaining at the top of his league as one of the most recognizable villains in all of DC, and that's thanks to his hidden superpower, the ability to keep up with the times. When Lex first started out in the Villain League, he was far different from the Luthor we've all come to know and love. In fact, he went by Alexi Luthor and even started out with red hair. Funny enough, Lex's baldness can be attributed to an art mistake where the penciler confused Lex with the bald and bulkier Ultra Humanite, giving us the look that Lex would rock for the rest of his existence. Now as time went on, he transformed from just a mad scientist into this evil businessman type. He still had this evil genius side to him, but now he had a big corporation doing his dirty work, which made him a more complex villain, adding depth by showing a different kind of intelligence and ambition. Now post-Crisis, the modern Lex is a mix of all these versions. He's an evil genius with the resources of a huge corporation, giving him a blend of sophistication and power. Next up is Magneto. For a character that started off as basically a knockoff to Doctor Doom, Magneto has certainly come a long way from being perceived as just a mere villain. Of course, at first glance he might seem like a bad guy bent on destroying humans, but his journey is deeper than that. His haunting origin story led him to believe that mutants should rule, given how humans treated mutants so poorly. As time rolled on, Magneto's story got twisty. Sometimes he teamed up with the good guys, showing a different side. He even began understanding the importance of working together with humans, at least on occasion. His character evolved, showcasing moments of empathy and understanding. I mean, sure, he still does clash with the X-Men, but his motivations and actions have changed. He's a prime example of a villain who's undergone a roller coaster journey, blurring the lines between good and bad. If you're enjoying the video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. Jason Todd. When this iteration of Robin first popped up in Batman comics, he was just a redhead acrobat sidekick, which is a far cry from the anti-hero we know today. His origin story changed over time from being a determined kid wanting to be Batman's sidekick to having a more darker, tragic past after Crisis on Infinite Earths. Now this guy wasn't just another Robin. He was more intense and pretty rough with bad guys, sometimes even crossing Batman's line. Now sadly, his impulsive nature led to his tragic end in A Death in the Family, where Joker beat him with a crowbar. This hit Batman hard, and Jason's death became a warning for future Robins about the dangers of their job. But after this, he miraculously came back to life and took up the mantle of the Red Hood. As the Red Hood, he went down a dark path, disagreeing with Batman's crime-fighting methods and becoming way more ruthless with criminals. Now over time, he's changed, becoming a better team player, leading his own squads, and even patching things up with Bruce Wayne. He's mellowed out a bit from his etchier days as the Red Hood, and is working to be a hero in his own way, even earning Batman's trust back. Next up is Sandman. William Baker, better known by his alias as Flint Marko, has most definitely come a long way. Starting out as just another super-powered thief, slowly but surely his character became fleshed out with a tragic backstory with a motive to justify his actions that would even make a grown man cry, or at least a young AJ. Baker has even been able to reform over the years, growing into a formidable anti-hero, which is a far cry from his initial appearance as a two-dimensional robber that got beaten by Spidey with a vacuum cleaner. Now, before all that, in his childhood, his dad wasn't around, his mom struggled with substance abuse, and bullies made his life miserable. When he finally stood up for himself, he got a taste for power, and that's when things took a turn. Flint started being a bully himself, letting others do his work because school wasn't his thing, but his path got even rockier when he messed with football games for money and then got kicked out of school. Then came his stint in prison, but that didn't hold him for long. After he escaped, he ended up in a nuclear test and survived, gaining these insane sand powers. Instead of turning his life around though, he chose the wrong path again, becoming the Sandman, using his powers for crime. Boy was he good at it, even being a founding member of the Sinister Six and the Fantastic Four. Now Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3, a film which most people would rather forget happened, revealed that all his villainy had been an attempt to save his terminally ill daughter, adding a touch of humanity to justify his actions and proving that deep down he's not such a bad guy. In fact, he would go on to fight alongside heroes in the Outlaws and the Wild Pack, and even as a reserve Avenger. While he continues to work against the law, there's still that spark of good which comes out every now and then. Catwoman. Ever since her debut in Batman comics, she's undergone some major transformations, making her one of the most dynamically changing villains. Initially seen as a Gotham baddie, she's now more of an anti-hero. She's been part of different groups like the Justice League and the Outsiders, proving that she's not all bad, especially after her and Batman's rocky engagement. Her backstory's been all over the place too. Before a big DC event, she had memory loss from a plane crash, but then another story, she was a dominatrix turned burglar, which is definitely crazy. Now one huge change came in 2015 when she smooched another Catwoman, which was a huge deal for the LGBTQ+ community, diversity and representation in comics. Now sometimes in her backstory she knows her parents, other times she grows up in an orphanage, her sister's in and out of the picture depending on which story you read, and her moral code is definitely all over the place. Sometimes she's not into eliminating people at all, but other times, when her loved ones are in danger, she is quick to throw down.
Number 7. Riddler. Over the years, from a visual standpoint, the Riddler has changed quite a bit. He's also been varying levels of sane throughout the years as well. Though he's always been somewhat criminally insane, as that's a huge part of what makes him so obsessed with the world of riddles. He also always has a brilliant mind, and it's often his obsession with riddles and giving his enemies at least the ability to solve and then thwart him that often gets him caught. Riddler has gone from jet black hair to ginger hair and has even been spotted with a question mark mohawk before. He has been seen wearing his full spandex question mark suit originally, which became more and more of a question marked suit and tie look, to just a polished suit and tie look with hints of question marks, to back to that full spandex suit, to a trench coat, to Arkham Asylum prisoner garb. New Earth Edward Nygma also had a daughter who was only briefly around and known as Enigma, a sometimes pal of the Joker's daughter Duella Dent. Look at where the Riddler started and finished, and you'll notice lots of visual and backstory changes to his character throughout the years. Number 6. Bane. While Bane in the comics might not have changed so very drastically over the years, the depiction of Bane's character in other media certainly has. Just compare comic book Bane to Nolan's Bane played by Tom Hardy, and then compare those two to the Harley Quinn animated series, and you've really got some different portrayals there. Bane in the animated series is sort of portrayed as being a not so bright but still quite strong softie. He is much less threatening than the other versions of Bane we have, and also much less of a genius, and he usually ends up as the butt of the other villains' jokes, and is often bullied by them, something that would likely never happen to comic book Bane, or Tom Hardy Bane for that matter. If the Legion of Doom were the mean girls, he'd be their Karen. Number 5. Carnage. In terms of changes, Carnage has seen a massive level up when it comes to power since his origins, and heck, even when he first appeared on the scene, Cletus Cassidy and his symbiotic friend were still a force to be reckoned with, striking terror into the fear of many hearts. But since the story of Maximum Carnage, we've also seen the story of Absolute Carnage come in, and learned that if we had thought Carnage couldn't get any more scary, well, we were wrong. In Absolute Carnage, Cletus' corpse is resurrected and bonded to the Grendel symbiote to create a new version of Carnage, which would later snowball into an even more powerful form known as Dark Carnage. Number 4. Sentinels. As the years and alternate timelines have continued to progress and multiply, we have seen tons of evolution from one of the X-Men's most iconic enemies, the Sentinels, with new models coming out made to adapt with the challenges of the times and the foes they are facing. In X-Men Gold, we saw nanite technology used in the creation of Sentinels to make them even more deadly, allowing them to adapt as needed, altering their size and shape. In the X-Men film Days of Future Past, we saw the evolution of Sentinels using Mystique's DNA to allow these Sentinels to change shape, but not only that, the Sentinels of the alternate post-apocalyptic future we saw were also insanely durable and could transform their body into bioweapons. This was a reimagining of the Sentinel technology potential, where these robotic beings, created by Dr. Bolivar Trask, had now become the ultimate enemy to mutant kind. Number 3. Dr. Octopus. Dr. Octopus went through a fairly big change when he decided to abandon his dying, failing body and complete one last sinister plot to steal Peter Parker's body for himself. He succeeded in swapping bodies with Peter, leaving Peter's consciousness stuck in his old failing body while he took up residence inside Peter's younger and much stronger body. However, Peter Parker's mind would still manage to convince Otto Octavius to not just let the change be a physical one, but also a mental one, swaying him to take up the mantle of Spider-Man and even inspiring him to set out on a mission to be an even better hero than Peter Parker was in the role. He took up the mantle of Superior Spider-Man. Well, now he's kind of being returned to his more classic appearance via a reborn duplicate of consciousness. Otto's time as Superior Spider-Man gave us the most changed version of the character we've ever seen. Number 2. Loki. Loki has been on a roller coaster of change over the years. While the Marvel Cinematic Universe may have introduced us to a more classic Loki, evil adopted brother of Thor and Norse god of mischief, the reality is in the comics Loki has seen all kinds of crazy changes made to his form and character since he first appeared. After Loki and everyone died during Ragnarok, we saw him return in a female form, taking Sif's body for his own, and we had Lady Loki. Loki would later be returned to his male adult body after Sif reclaimed her own physical form. But then Loki would die again, and instead be returned to us as Kid Loki, who was more heroic and far less villainous than his original counterpart. And now we have Loki Prime, who basically has returned to his original form, but also holds within him all the altered forms that have come previous. He has the absorbed knowledge of the different versions we've known over the years, and can transform into any of them at will, even forms he didn't necessarily choose for himself. Number 1. Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn has seen momentous change over the years to her character. She has become independent of the Joker while starting out as simply a small character who is meant to be his little sidekick and girlfriend. She moved from the Batman animated series to the comics to the big screen. Her outfit has changed multiple times, and her attitude has also changed along with it. As she's become more self-aware, she's begun to question more why she does what she does, attempting to understand her motivations and even better, herself, moving slightly closer with every passing year from the category of ultimate supervillain towards the role of anti-hero. Just creeping up there.
Number 10. The Joker. In the Last Night on Earth series, we find Bruce Wayne at Arkham Asylum. Yeah, it's super sad and dark. He wakes up to discover that he has never in fact been Batman. Like when he goes to hug Alfred, the panel quickly cuts and then Batman is like out in this random wasteland almost. And he has like this sort of asylum suit on with wavy pieces of white clothing that kind of blows behind him. It looks like Edward Scissorhands or like a mummy. It's kind of cool. But he wakes up in this desert, and in the midst of all this confusion, he sees a lantern. Not like a lantern, like an actual lantern, you know? And what's in the lantern, you might be thinking? Just the Joker's head. That's right. So Batman and Noggin, as he refers to it. Yeah, so this Joker has quips. It kind of feels like Shrek a little bit. Now hear me out. We have Batman just trying to figure this whole ordeal out, and he's just trying to figure out pieces along the way, and then we have this crazy sidekick who just loves to talk. The writers really amped it up in issue number 3 of The Last Night on Earth. So during the duo's travels, Joker mentions, in a jokingly manner of course, that he wanted to be Batman's next Robin. Could you imagine that? Well, yeah, you can because it happens. And it's awesome too. So basically you take this lantern Joker's head and mix it in with Tim Drake's mech Robin suit that he no longer needs, and bam, you have the new Robin. He's an actual sidekick in this too, like he almost dies trying to save Bruce from Omega. The Last Night on Earth. Go check it out right now. Well, after the video, but yeah. Number 9. Mr. Freeze. Making his debut back in Batman Volume 2, Issue 1, Mr. Freeze is an iconic Batman villain, and partially because I think the best actor in the world played him in Batman and Robin. That's right, I'm talking about our boy Arnold. Mr. Freeze's biology was altered after being bathed in chirochemicals, so his body heat is only that of 23 degrees Fahrenheit. So anything he touches will also freeze. Now of course this also slows his aging down drastically. He wears a Cairo suit to help keep his body temperature below freezing. That is, until a recent Detective Comics issue 1012. Nanotech saves the day. That's right, for years Mr. Freeze has been working with nanotech over and over again until finally he can now survive without the use of his helmet. I mean, as cool as the helmet did look, I think the main Avatar Blue Man Group kind of look suits him, you know? What do you guys think? Helmet? On? Off? I think off. Number 8. Scarecrow. Okay, this next one's for the nerds who also like to game out. Jonathan Crane, aka Scarecrow, is one of my favorite villains, hands down. After making his first appearance in World's Finest Comics, issue 3, and also portrayed by Cillian Murphy in the Nolan trilogy, Scarecrow is known to use fear as a main weapon, which is pretty sick. So we see this in Batman Begins, but we really see the full effects of where he can go mentally, specifically in the game Arkham Asylum. I mean, he's insanely scary and quite the big deal. He almost acted like Freddy Krueger in some ways. Like one minute you'll be walking around in the middle of a mission, maybe you're scanning something, and then all of a sudden the camera starts to change a bit, and then the game changes, and then all of a sudden you're in this crazy nightmare. And it's so smooth the way it happens that you get kind of concerned, someone who's actually playing it. I also love seeing this type of Scarecrow in a video game because it made me feel like I was part of it. Like literally I was part of the action. You feel like a detective in the entire game series, it's done so well, but then you also feel pretty scared when you're not sure of what you're seeing is supposed to happen in the game. Some parts I swear my game was glitching. Amazing series if you haven't played it yet.
Black Adam. He started off as a baddie due to his family mess. He claimed that he was innocent in some serious stuff involving Captain Marvel's folks, and it turned out that he wasn't the guilty party. But even with his newfound good guy claim, he ended up causing trouble with the Justice Society, teaming up with the bad guys at first, the Injustice League. Later on, after some brain surgery to remove a tumor, he switched sides again, helping the good guys beat the bad ones. He even helped the Justice Society in a huge fight against this demon dude. Now, they were weary about letting him join the team because of his super shady past, but eventually they gave him a chance. The thing is, he couldn't shake his old ways entirely. He and some pals went a bit too extreme, deciding to take justice into their own hands by offing a terrorist, which caused a huge fight in the Justice Society again. Even though he had moments of being a hero, his past just kept on haunting him. He had ups and downs, sometimes doing good, sometimes causing chaos, but lately he's been leaning more towards the hero stuff, teaming up with big leagues like the Justice League. But the big question hanging over him is whether he'll stay on the hero path or slip back into his dark side. Thanos, the big baddie from the Marvel Universe, didn't always look the same or act the same in comics or in movies. When he first popped up in the 70s, he was this skinny, less wrinkly purple guy, but as time passed, artists beefed him up to resemble the much bulkier villain we recognize today. This dude didn't just change physically though. He started out as a shady character, working behind the scenes and using gadgets for power, but later, he upgraded to this super powerful being wielding insane cosmic abilities, culminating in the infamous Snap. But he didn't always stay a full-time bad guy. Sometimes he teamed up with the good guys, which was pretty weird, and in a comic series called Infinity, he even got his own squad of followers, making him way more organized in his evil deeds. They did lots of changes for the movies too. In Infinity War, Thanos wasn't just this evil guy for the sake of it. He had the idea to make the universe better by destroying half of anything, which was pretty crazy. Doctor Doom, usually the thorn in the side of Fantastic Four, but once in a blue moon, he pulls off a move that makes you think twice about his villainous ways. In this wild Marvel showdown called Secret Wars in 2015, Doom did the unthinkable, admitting that Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic himself, could have done a better job with all the power Doom had, which is super shocking considering it's coming from Dr. Doom. Even more mind-blowing, Doom gave up his crazy cosmic powers to Reed, and in return, Reed fixed Doom's messed up face. Now, after this whole power swap, Doom went all in to be a good guy. Yeah, that's right. When Tony was out of action because of Captain Marvel, Doom took on the Iron Man gig. And guess what? He was not pretending. He genuinely wanted to be a hero, which is just insane to think about. But even for a hot minute, he had even teamed up with the Human Torch and the Thing, fighting the good fight. Major Disaster. Once a not so popular green baddie, Major Disaster surprised everyone by flipping the script and joining the Justice League of America. Back in the day, he was like this forgotten action figure buried deep in the toy chest, a Z-list villain that nobody really cared about. But then, he became a Justice League member during the Joe Kelly and Doug Mankey's JLA run, and the shockwaves were astronomical. A villain teaming up with the heroes was major eyebrow-raising material. At first, the League gave him the side eye as expected, trust issues, you know, but slowly but surely they warmed up to him. This was Major Disaster's shining moment in the big leagues. Fans cheered for his unexpected turnaround. But then eventually, after the story arc, he panicked. He just vanished. Fans were pretty bummed because they wanted more, but he's been missing in action ever since. Mr. Freeze, initially known as Dr. Victor Fries or Mr. Zero, started off as a typical icy antagonist in the world of comic books. But let me tell you, his story took a wild turn in 1992 with that Batman the Animated Series episode called Heart of Ice. You see, before that, it was just your run-of-the-mill baddie chilling out in the background of Batman's world, but then something magical happened. The animated series reimagined Mr. Freeze, giving him depth that we'd never seen before. And his voice, oh man, he had this deep, haunting voice that made you just feel his pain. Suddenly, Freeze wasn't just freezing Gotham, he was a guy wrecked by sadness and revenge. The core of this story revolved around his wife, Nora. Freeze was desperately trying to save her from a terminal illness, but big corporate greed and a tragic lab accident with cryogenic stuff turned him into a guy who can't survive outside of an ice suit. But then things got icy in a bad way. Remember Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze in that Batman and Robin movie? Yeah, the one with all the cold puns like chill out and ice to meet you. It was a goofy take that turned Freeze into a walking joke, and unfortunately that's what many folks still remember him as to this day. In the comics, Freeze stayed close to the serious version from the animated series until the New 52 reboot shook things around. Scott Snyder took Freeze in a different direction, making him way less sympathetic by altering his backstory. Suddenly Nora wasn't his wife anymore, just some girl with a made-up illness, and the guy who pulled the plug on his research, surprise surprise, it was none other than Bruce Wayne himself, which was a twist that made everyone involved a lot less likable. So while some chop him up as just a dude with the freeze ray, he's actually way cooler than that.
pun intended.
Number 10. Spider-Man. We still have a few issues to wait for this, but it was announced at the end of 2020 that Peter Parker will also be getting a brand new look in 2021, designed by artist Dustin Weaver in tandem with the creative team on Amazing Spider-Man. As we won't be seeing this costume till issue 61, with it being featured on the covers of issue 62 and 63 of the current series, we don't know too much about it other than, well, what it looks like. The new look could be described as kind of futuristic and even a little bit reminiscent of Peter's dark white Future Foundation suit he had a while back. It'll be interesting to see if this costume is just as good at staying clean, or perhaps shifting into other looks or colors as that costume was. I hope it at least is good at staying clean. I feel like anytime you wear a bright white accented superhero suit in New York City, it's gonna be tricky unless you have Mr. Fantastic's unstable molecules. Black Mask. Black Mask hasn't changed as much as some of the others on this list, but he did receive a refresh to his look in Future State, and he got a bold new wardrobe in the Harley Quinn Birds of Prey film earlier last year. Gone are the days of pinstripe suits for Black Mask as 2021 comes around, and I gotta say, thank goodness. In Future State, we get a black, white, red, and gold palette for this new design, with a much more detailed and lavish mask featuring red glowing eyes and gold teeth. To me, this screams the horror that is Black Mask even more loudly than any of his previous looks. Whereas in BOP, Ewan McGregor delivered as Black Mask not just with a mesmerizing performance, but also with various loud and polished suits and looks, including a button-up shirt with a custom print design pattern featuring his own face. Seriously, the costuming for that movie was so good. Loved it so much. Alright friends, before we move on to this next point, if you want to help us out here at the channel, you can do so by giving this video a thumbs up. Seriously, it really does help, and thank you for anyone that's already done it. Number 8. Hulkling. Hulkling kept his color scheme, but also had some major changes to his role in the Marvelverse and his look in the past year. With Empire, we saw him take his rightful place as Emperor of the Alliance, uniting both the Kree and Skrull empires together. He also was forced to march on his own home, planet Earth, and had to consider the possibility that he might actually have to destroy it, as he faced the alien plant race known as the Katati, who were there and were using Earth to bolster their strength and their power. He also got a sweet cape and more regal looking variant of his suit, and the awesome and epic star sword known as Excelsior. Oh, and while we weren't looking, he and Wiccan also got married. Thank goodness we got to go to the wedding after them. I was like, where's my invite? Why didn't I get invited to this wedding?
Number 7. Poison Ivy. Taking place in Batman Joker War, we find a ravaged Gotham City. The Joker has sent out all his goons to run around and basically mess the place up. Most of Batman's villains are just laying low at this point, just kind of waiting to see what happens, you know, just watching from afar. Now at this point, we haven't really seen much of Poison Ivy in the storyline. After a brawl with Punchline and Harley, most of Poison Ivy's hidden underground cave called Eden burned down. So Poison Ivy returns to look for Harley, and she sees the damage. Oh, there were a few of Joker's goons inside, but they obviously didn't last long, as you would have expected. She explains to the last guy before she kills him that she's done with distractions, and instead of rebuilding this cave, which she easily could have done, she summons up this new plant called Devil's Ivy. Cool name too. Speaking of cool names, she reveals her new persona, Queen Ivy. That's right, shortly after she builds a throne, a fancy new outfit, and to top it all off, a crown. I dig it. Number 6. Killer Croc. AKA Waylon Jones, he made his first debut in Batman number 357. We saw him in Suicide Squad, and he looked pretty bad. It's kind of like a dinosaur, or like the lizard from Amazing Spider-Man, whatever. We don't talk about that movie in here. We're talking about DC, we're not talking about them. So the introduction of his character in Suicide Squad actually got me pretty pumped. And then the rest of the movie happened, so. Short-lived, to say the least. His OG look wasn't nearly as menacing though. I mean, see, from his debut back in 1983, he looked like a guy. A strange-looking guy, but still more human than his current look nonetheless. Now at this point, he was just a criminal with a scaly skin disease, where now he looks like a monster, donning the full-on Croc monster look. And if you want to see these big changes for yourself, make sure you check out Batman Hush Killer Croc, where he looks arguably the most bad. There's one panel where he's just towering over Catwoman and he's like, I want my money! And she's like, alright man, chill out. I would my leather pants. Very fast. Number 5, Joker. This one is super recent. I did say spoilers at the beginning of this video. You were warned. Warned, I tell ya. So in Batman Joker War, the Joker appears to be wearing a bat suit. Yeah, and it's pretty bad looking too. I mean, come on. He's got the smile across his chest, they got the ha-ha-ha's written on the side, and to top it all off, he's even sporting the purple cape. It's amazing. So Batman had no idea that this is what he would find. I mean, first a dead Alfred greeting him, and then now a Joker in a bat suit. Get me out of this nightmare, what is going on? So how did this even come about? While Punchline and Joker's goons turned Gotham into a flaming death zone, like I mentioned earlier, the Joker was busy going after Wayne's fortunes. And I loved seeing this version of the Joker as well, like going after Wayne's money right off the bat, pun intended, even confirming his own actions by saying, you know what, I'm going against my own brand on this one. It's just fun. And we also saw similar looking suits back before Suicide Squad even came out, and like promo material and stuff. And it got us pretty hyped up. Me and my friends were talking about it. Yet, it never happened. A lot of those things just didn't happen in that movie, eh? Number 4, Clayface. Basil Karlo, aka Clayface, made his first debut back in 1940 in Detective Comics numero 40. He was an actor that had gone a touch crazy when a remake of his classic movie was released with a new actor. Kind of like what we get to see every other month. So he decided to adopt this persona of an old movie villain, Clayface. And this guy's pretty neat. He can mimic anybody just by getting a smidgen of DNA. He can change the shape, the size of his body. Solid actor, eh? So method. Cut to Detective Comics Volume 1, Issue 934. Clayface had escaped Arkham Asylum. Why, you ask? To go to the movies. Yep, he went to go see himself on the big screen. To see himself. I don't watch myself really. I watch a few of these, but too scared. So as the crowd of moviegoers obviously runs out in a frenzy, Clayface is left sitting there wide-eyed, just wondering what could have been, watching his own performance. So Batman and Batgirl enter the theater, shocked that this is the reason he escaped. All he wants in this moment is just to watch the 84-minute movie and feel good again, to remind him who he was once. Batman responds with, well, what if I could give you more than that? What's the catch, he answers? Well, the catch is, says Batgirl, you're gonna have to do everything we say. And poof, we have Clayface on the home team. Let's go. Number 3, Harley Quinn. Making her first debut back in Batman Harley Quinn in 1999 and portrayed by the insanely talented Margot Robbie, literally one of the best actors on the face of the earth, Harley Quinn has always been known for flipping back and forth, changing sides. She's kinda weaving in and out a little bit, you know? Even her character evolution in the new DC movies alone, like looking at Harley in Birds of Prey compared to how we met her in Suicide Squad. In the comics, her relationship with the Joker is abusive and it's controlling, and Harley has histrionic personality disorder, so she has a lot of things in common with the Joker. So when it comes to seeking attention with all these crime lords, she's super entertaining when she tries to get Mr. J's attention. She uses her psychiatrist skills to get in close, you know, get in your head a little bit. She's super lovable as well. I mean, obviously, look who's playing her. I'm glad DC is moving Harley to be her own character in this new live action franchise. It's a nice message too. It's like, you know what, no matter how deep in love you are with a psycho, you can always break out of it, start a gang, and kick some bad guys' ass. There's always time, guys. Number 2, Catwoman. Making her first debut in Batman number 1, Selina Kyle looked a bit different from the start, to say the least. We've seen numerous actors play the iconic jewel thief, from Michelle Pfeiffer, or as I said growing up, Michelle Pfeiffer, to Zoe Kravitz, set to play her in the upcoming Batman flick with Pattinson. So we know the look by now. All black, slick, couple of quips, some eyebrow raises. She kicks. This look was never the case, however. In the first issue she appeared in, she was actually referred to as the Cat, simply put. And at this time, her outfit looked just a bit more lame, if I can say. She kind of looked like Doctor Strange in a weird way. The all yellow dress, the red cape, but the best part, she had a realistic fur mask. It wasn't until 1946 until her mask was changed to a more fitting look. Still not quite what we're used to, but it's a step in the right direction, that's for sure. Then in the 50s, she was deemed more of a sidekick to Batman rather than a villain. And finally, number 1, the Joker, Death of the Family. This next one is wild. And yes, the Joker was on this list more than once. Well, because I wrote it, okay? That's it. We go back to 2012, Batman Volume 2, Issue 13. Now, the Joker at this point had not been in Gotham City for about a year now. He originally got captured and sent to Arkham Asylum, but that was all part of his plan. So while he was in there, he made a meeting with Dollmaker, where they cut off Joker's face, and then the Joker escaped without a face. So a year later, the Joker returned to Gotham, still without a face, kills some cops, all Joker-like, still without a face, and then he steals his own face out of the evidence room, just slaps it on. He kind of has to tie it. It's really gross. Imagine looking around and then you just see your own face. That's it. So he masks up, or faces up, whatever you want to call it, and then he captures Alfred. Wild. The look of this mask though, oh, it's so loose and gross. It looks like baloney. You gotta love it.
Number 10, Kitty Pryde. But now she'd rather you call her Kate. We've seen a huge transformation for Kitty Pryde over the years. Her power levels have grown exponentially, with her now not needing to even hold her breath while using her powers. Her exposure to the ancient artifact known as the Black Vortex exponentially boosted her powers, allowing her to phase the entire planet of Spartax through its snug amber casing. She has since changed even more, becoming the fearsome Captain Kate in the new Dawn of X run. Kate becomes the captain of the ship known as the Marauder and recruits her own crew of mutant friends, a new team she calls the Marauders. That's right, she's taking that name back for the heroes this time around. No more bad guy Marauders. Her new look and role as the Red Queen has definitely been a massive change for Kate, but one that I think many of us have loved. Number 9, Gwen Stacy. Gwen Stacy was one of Peter Parker's first ever girlfriends and definitely remains his first love. Even with his long-standing relationship with Mary Jane, he'll never forget Gwen. But Gwen died a long time ago in comic book history, and she hasn't really ever officially come back to stay. So, how can she have changed if she's, kind of permanently dead? Well, what has really changed when it comes to Gwen is her overall character. Now, when you are talking about Gwen Stacy, the first comic book version of her that comes to mind, usually for most people, is Spider-Gwen of Earth 65 these days. This version of Gwen is a little bit more edgy and rebellious. Instead of Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man on Earth 65, it was Gwen who took up the mantle as Spider-Woman. She's a very different and honestly more interesting and successful version of the Earth 616 Gwen. And it's crazy to think that comic book fans usually think of Spider-Gwen before thinking of the original whenever her name is brought up. Just because Spider-Gwen's a little cooler, let's be honest. Number 8, Captain Marvel / Carol Danvers. No, we're not talking about the gender bending of this superhero persona from the Kree Marvel to becoming the now part Kree / human Carol Danvers. We are talking about just Carol Danvers' growth as a character here. Originally, Carol was a security guard who ended up getting powers while being saved by the original Captain Marvel as the Psyche Magnetron exploded. This machine was sort of like a wish granting machine, and during the explosion, Carol's exposure allowed her wish to be granted. She got superpowers similar to Marvel's. She would go on to become Miss Marvel, lose her memory a few times, and eventually become the strong and very independent woman that she is today. A member of the Avengers who has since taken on the Captain Marvel mantle for herself, once her former lover / friend / role model, Marvel, passed away. We've seen Carol change not just in her superhero mantle and character design, but we've also seen her personality change and grow over time. And we've witnessed her become even stronger and even more sure of herself as time has progressed. Most of that probably has to do with her, not losing her memory as often anymore. Number 7, Harley Quinn. Harley has always been a pretty big fan of changing up her look, so it shouldn't be much of a surprise that she would make our list for new changes to design this year. Harley is likely going to be seeing not just external changes, but is also going to be seeing some internal ones as well that will carry on towards her new series in 2021. In Future State Harley Quinn, we are not only served up an awesome new look for Harley, but we are also going to be exploring Harley's allegiances and her alignment in depth, where she's coming more into her sense of independence and growing even more as she wrestles with just what kind of anti-hero or even full-on hero she wants to be. Aside from Future State, Harley also got a new look for the Suicide Squad, which seems to echo the look Margot Robbie will be sporting as Harley in the upcoming Suicide Squad movie. Number 6, Spider-Woman. There has been some controversy over Spider-Woman's new outfit, so I'd like to come in and clear the air a little bit. Also, I've said it before and I will say it again, if you are not reading this new Spider-Woman series, what are you doing with your life? You need to check your priorities because it is actually so good. It should be at the tippy top of everyone's reading list right now. And if it's not, I'm looking at you, I'm chastising you. Put it up there. Put it at least on your list. Spider-Woman sports a new suit in her newest series starting in issue number 1, but the suit is also amazingly integrated into the story. It's not only justified by Jessica Drew as to kind of why she needs it, but it also features into the ongoing storyline as well in a way that is very intriguing. No spoilers. For Jess though, I will share that she decides she needs a new look when everyone's favorite stay-at-home dad, Roger, suggests a return to security work, or as Jess refers to it as, more like mercenary work. After Jess laments a pileup of bills, Jessica then decides she needs a separate suit to signify that the work that she is doing is paid hero work to any onlookers and not as altruistic as her standard fare. Also, I love when she's like, I don't know, because like it's not very hero-y of me to accept payment, and Roger is like, you'll always be our hero. And I'm just like, oh, it's so cute. Her needing a new costume for this makes sense to me. And I personally think the new suit looks great, especially when she's on her bike. For some reason, it's just like really good bike suit. Number 5, Katana. In Future State, the next Batman issue #1, we get a glimpse into some other going-ons in Gotham with some extra stories. One such group that we are introduced to is the Outsiders. Honestly, a group that I immediately wanted even more of after I finished their story. The Outsiders are a group of vigilantes who aim to help free the people from under the rule and thumb of the Magistrate, the future villain that everyone in Gotham seems to have to deal with in one way or another. Members of the team include Signal and a seemingly reluctant Katana, but one who has also received not only an updated badass look, but also an upgrade when it comes to her abilities. Honestly, I love this new look, and I love her new jetpack too, even if we only got it for that one issue. Number 4, Professor X. Or maybe just X, as I think he's going by now. Is it X? Though it's hard to keep track of these new names, honestly, especially considering Apocalypse has one, but no one seems to use it, calling him every other name that he's gone at length to say, don't call me that, at any given opportunity. Professor X is now younger and more agile than we've ever seen him before. Well, maybe not as most agile. He's not able to like dodge bullets or anything. During Dawn of X, we also see that Charles also now has a completely new look and design, with him wearing a form-fitting all-black suit and keeping Cerebro on at all times. Makes him also look very mysterious. Number 3, Wonder Woman. With the Wonder Woman films being some of the more successful DC films out there in terms of box office numbers and just overall viewership, as obviously not a lot of us are going to the theaters right now, it seems DC is putting Wonder Woman at the forefront of their latest refresh. We've seen Wonder Woman go through quite a few changes over the last year, from wielding a chainsaw with her lasso of truth operating as its ripcord to her being elevated to god level by the end of the latest death metal event, when she took on the Batman Who Laughs herself. As Future State continues to develop, we'll not only see her character evolve into a new role in the DC universe, but we've also seen the massively successful introduction to new popular Brazilian Wonder Woman, Yara Flor. Everything seems to be coming up Wonder Woman right now in the best way possible. Number 2, Donald Blake. Donald Blake doesn't just have a whole new look, he also has a whole new agenda, as he returns not as Thor's ally, but as his enemy. He's hell-bent on a mission to take down not just Thor, but all of Asgard and the Asgardian gods besides. He sports a new, darker and crazed look, while also brandishing his signature wood stick, but also armed with a scalpel, which is terrifying. He looks like a wizard gone mad, which is fair considering, well, all of that Donald has been through up to this point. Everyone beware, because evil Donald Blake has arrived. He is looking for some payback. Number 1, Poison Ivy. Ivy has had quite a wild ride the last few years when it comes to changes in looks and even her alignment. In 2019, we got a brand new look from her after she was brought back to life by Wally West, resurrected from a flower she'd given Harley in Heroes in Crisis. After that, Ivy went through a lot more changes until we got a completely new outfit and redesign for her in 2020, where she dubbed herself Queen Ivy and threatened all of Gotham with vines, or perhaps more accurately roots, below its surface in Joker Warzone. We are still waiting to see how this plays out, but while I love that Ivy has taken the title of Queen, I'm hoping this plot ends up being more fearsome than the plant that is actually known as Queen Ivy, which looks like a houseplant that you might find your granny tending. Not to say grannies can't be fearsome. I mean, hey, look at Granny Goodness. But I love that she's supposed to be like Devil's Ivy, and then they were like Queen Ivy. Number 10, Gold Beetle. Gold Beetle is a new character that appears in Future State Suicide Squad, who appears to be a mashup between Booster Gold and Blue Beetle, which is kind of an adorable concept if you ask me. She made her first glorious appearance at the end of the secondary story in Future State Suicide Squad issue number 1, but that likely isn't all we'll be seeing of her. April's cover for Flash issue 769 seems to suggest that she'll also be joining Wally West's Flash for some more adventures. Now that should be fun. Number 9, Eternal Garden. We see the future of Kara Zor-El come to an end in issue number 2 of Kara Zor-El Superwoman. Here we see her Fortress of Solitude become a home to many as the years go on. As more and more people come there to aspire to live up to her image and her name as she ages, the Fortress of Solitude earns a new name as the Eternal Garden. Even if you aren't completely sold on this dramatic change, it's still one worth reading about just for all of even this pretty art and the colors that it brings to you. Kara lives out her days here, and eventually the Eternal Garden becomes her eternal resting place. Kind of love it. It's really, really pretty, like wow, so pretty. You definitely need to check it out. I just even want to hang these covers up. I really love the covers for that series. Number 8, the Arkham Knights. One of the most interesting groups to come out of Gotham has been the Arkham Knights. This team is one created out of the deranged criminal minds from Arkham. Some interesting elements are that their hideout is Wayne Manor, in a world where, of course, many believe that Batman is dead, so this is like a Wayne Manor that's abandoned right now. The members of the team also are focusing on not just advancing themselves with physical training, but are also engaged in therapy still as well. So it's kind of like some weird villains turned hero team building and rehabilitation exercise that is all led by Astrid Arkham, the last surviving member of the Arkham family, also known herself as Arkham Knight. Hence the team name, Arkham Knights. Get it? She's the Arkham Knight. The team includes such characters as Victor Zsasz, Copperhead, Clayface, Dr. Phosphorus, Two-Face, Humpty Dumpty, Killer Croc, and Anarchy. And before we move on to our next point, just a quick reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying it. It really does help us out here at the channel, and thank you if you already have. Number 7, Poison Ivy. Ivy has always had a sort of pin-up look to her. She's gone from being an eco-terrorist and supervillain to a borderline hero, or at the very least, a neutral kind of figure. She's worked with the Birds of Prey and was even granted access to the superhero mental facility known as Sanctuary. Her design originally involved a leafy bodice before becoming more full coverage, with her wearing a black full bodysuit covered in foliage, likely to grant her more control over her poisonous touch. However, since her death and resurrection, her look has been radically changed once more, with her now having a sort of a green sinewy look, making her appear as though she is literally made out of plant life, which kind of would make sense considering this version of Poison Ivy was born from a rose, a piece of herself that she'd given to Harley. Number 6, She-Hulk. Speaking of people that are green, Jennifer Walters had to wrestle with a lot since she was first introduced. She has had to deal with her permanent connection to Bruce Banner and has had to work to earn a sense of separation from his character as the Hulk. She went from being a sexy, playful pinup hero to a full-on rage-filled, muscle-bound machine in terms of her appearance, and inside, Jen has had to deal with acknowledging her addiction to her Hulk form, as well as working to heal from that addiction. Everything she has been through has changed, not just her on the inside, but these changes have also creeped into her character design as well. Most of the changes to She-Hulk's behavior and appearance came from her powers getting a big boost, and the change has been so great that even Jen herself was forced to acknowledge it, as the two versions of herself ended up facing off in a mental courtroom. She had to reconcile with that stuff. She was like, which Hulk do I want to be? And they were like, I'm better, I'm better. They're both pretty good, I think. Number 5, Dazzler. Alison Blair has had so many different looks over the years that have been so drastic, it's hard to keep track, because there are likely some comics, depending on which Dazzler you are most familiar with, where you wouldn't even recognize her. A lot of her changes have come about because when she was created, she was somewhat kind of trapped in a time capsule. She had a very disco era look to her because she originally came out in 1979, just as disco was kind of getting ready to fade into the background. This was also because originally her character was created in partnership with Casablanca and its founder Neil Bogart. However, eventually Casablanca pulled away from the project, leaving Dazzler as Marvel's sole property. As times and trends have changed, so did Dazzler's look. She got a redesigned costume from Professor X during her time with the X-Men that was more superhero looking and a little less disco. She's had almost every hair color under the sun: red, pink, and black, as well as her iconic long blonde hair look, but she's also worn her hair short and even shorter many times. Like most female musical artists, it seems that Allison also feels the need to reinvent herself often. Number 4, Dr. Octopus. Doc Ock went from a straight-up villain who once plotted to steal Aunt May's recent inheritance by marrying her and becoming Peter's new uncle, kind of a weird plan, to body swapping with Peter and becoming the new Spider-Man. Not how he wanted that plan originally to go. Of course, originally he simply aimed to just steal Peter's body, as his was failing him. But Peter ended up flooding Otto's mind with his memories and convincing him to turn heroic. Otto did end up being convinced and agreed to take on the mantle of Spider-Man, becoming Superior Spider-Man. And he stayed as Superior Spider-Man for quite some time, before eventually feeling that he had kind of ultimately failed and relinquishing the body back to Peter's consciousness. He has since reappeared with his more classic appearance and role, with no memory of his time as Superior Spider-Man, how convenient, but still, for the original Dr. Octopus, his time as Superior Spider-Man remains part of his history, and was definitely a huge change for the character, and one that went on for a while. Number 3, Venom. Eddie Brock has basically done a full 180. When he was first introduced, he was a Spider-Man villain who would stop at nothing to defeat Peter Parker, whom Eddie blamed for all of his misfortune. He ended up joining forces with a symbiotic being that Spider-Man himself had rejected, and their relationship together as Venom was solidified through their joint hatred of the wall-crawling vigilante. However, over the years, Eddie's focus would shift. Where this likely all started from was the tiny bit of consciousness we saw early on as Brock wrestled with his Venom persona when it came to not harming any civilians or innocents on his revenge mission. This goodness in him would grow over time, and now Venom is no longer really a villain, but is more of an anti-hero, and even often an ally to Peter Parker's Spider-Man, albeit usually a begrudging ally. Number 2, Iceman. Remember when Bobby was first introduced and he was basically a snowman? When it comes to Iceman, one of the greatest changes we've seen from him is just how much his power levels have grown. There was a time when Emma Frost, while body swapping with him, was actually better at using his powers than even he was, inspiring Bobby to learn from Emma and work hard to learn in general how to better control and use his powers. His control has improved so much so that many consider him to be Alpha or even Omega level. The depiction of Bobby's sexual orientation has also changed. Originally, he was presented as being straight until 2015 in the comics, when Bobby realized he was gay, and in later years went on to fully accept this and even come out. While he's dated a lot of women over the years, he's currently in a relationship with Emma's brother, fellow mutant, and current White Bishop, Christian Frost. And I kind of love them together, I'm not gonna lie. Number 1, Harley Quinn. Harleen Quinzel has seen some pretty radical changes to her role in the comics and her character design. She was once the Joker's girlfriend and partner in crime, but after years of suffering and being mistreated by him and years of living in his shadow, Harley finally decided to break things off with the Joker. She went out on her own, even when he tried to track her down during her time with the Suicide Squad and convince her to return to him. The Joker told Harley that she would be nothing without him, and that he'd practically made her. He terrorized her, turned her hyenas, Bud and Lou Rabbit, and sicked them on her, forcing her to kill them. This did not inspire Harley to return to the Joker's side though, but instead strengthened her resolve. And it turns out he was wrong about Harley, as she has done pretty well for herself on her own, having all kinds of wacky fun adventures and becoming a more neutral character than a straight up villain. Number 10, all masks are bad. Whereas we've known the government to not necessarily condone vigilantes, they usually aren't actively hunted down by the police or federal agents. However, in Future State Gotham, we see a new status quo, one where vigilantes are seen as just as bad as the villains that they fight against. In some stories, villains are referred to as black hats and heroes are referred to as white hats, but at the end of the day, they are all the same in terms of them being masks. And that isn't good in this future at all. Masks are basically seen by Gotham's ruling forces as criminals, and Gotham is even working to make sure no one can question their authority when it comes to shooting and killing masks on sight. In fact, they've already made that a policy, though there are still some legal precedents that Gotham's police and peacekeepers need to overcome and figure out when it comes to avoiding prosecution themselves. Number 9, Harley Quinn team up. kind of a weird one too. In Harley Quinn issue number 1, we find out that Harley has been captured by the Magistrate and is being used as a pawn and tool for Dr. Jonathan Crane, formerly known as Scarecrow. In this current climate, Scarecrow of course is no more, as masks are illegal. Harley, after being captured for being a mask, gets some time to reflect on her own alignment a bit, and I'm sure that that will end up actually being her overarching journey in this story, to figure out sort of who she is and where she belongs. To start, however, she seems to be pretty balanced, or I guess kind of unbalanced, when it comes to doing both. She is tasked by Crane to use her brilliant former doctor and psychologist mind to help him find and defeat other villainous masks who have been eluding the Magistrate so that they might be imprisoned. An interesting and, for Crane, infuriating team up that will hopefully end up leading to Harley's release, escape, or hey, maybe even we'll just leave her simply as Crane's oddball but genius partner. I'm kind of down for any/all of the above. Number 8, spoiler, the traitor. Stephanie Brown seems to have found a new title amongst her Bat family in Future State, and that title is Traitor. Initially, Spoiler was believed to have turned her back on the Bat family, befriending various villains and leaving her heroic ways behind, then becoming captured by the Magistrate's forces and locked up. She really started focusing on survival as opposed to doing what is right, which caused her to be looked down upon by the fellow members of her Bat family. We see her and Cassandra Cain actually come to blows, fighting one another initially when they are made cellmates. It seems like there is potentially going to be a lot of tension between this very divided Bat family. Something that we don't usually see much of. Okay, well, depending on which members we're talking about. The question is if Spoiler, or Patch as we know her in Future State, has really changed sides for good. Or I guess I mean for bad. But is it permanent? I'm gonna have to read to find out. Number 7, New Teen Titans. A lot seems to be happening in the new Future State Teen Titans comic, one of the most preeminent being that we have a new team of Titans emerging here, featured even on the cover. But who are they, and how did they come to be Teen Titans, and what old members of the team still remain? Well, we still have Nightwing and Starfire in the team, as well as Beast and Cyborg, though in a new form, but we also have Miko Queen. Oliver's half-sister is Red Arrow, or potentially just Arrow now in this bleak future. They also seem to be working alongside Shazam here as well, who has his own team, and of course they have the surviving students of their school. This story of Teen Titans takes place after the school's collapse and the unfortunate demise of many of their pupils, as well as like much of the world. The team opened up the school to train new young superheroes, which I love as a concept, and I'm actually really excited for the spin-off series that's going to come out of this, which is the Teen Titans Academy, where hopefully we'll get lots more look-backs to the nice, happy days at the Academy. That'll be cute. Number 6, Deathwing. There is actually so much going on in Teen Titans when it comes to the team and world changes. One being that near the end of issue number 1 of that series, Dick Grayson becomes Deathwing, donning a Deathstroke mask and his Nightwing suit. In issue number 2, we are also offered another alternative for this mashup name that is pretty hilarious, but that I definitely cannot repeat here on YouTube. So if you're not reading Future State Teen Titans, by the way, it's definitely, I think, worth a read. I really enjoyed it personally. Some people think it's too much, I think it's just enough. We also learned in issue number 2 that Nightwing has been working on and off with Slade Wilson, so in that regard, his look also makes a lot of sense here. Although Grayson insists that he hasn't worked with Wilson in months now. Still, I don't think his team is fully convinced on that point. I feel like Starfire is also just rolling her eyes, she's like, oh my gosh. Nightwing, why? Number 5, New Justice League. Now that it's been a little bit, I feel like I can chat about what went on with our Justice League team at the end of their story in issue 1. Not only do we have a new roster, which I'll get to in a minute, but at the end of that issue number 1 of Future State Justice League, we saw them become trapped and replaced. Of course, they weren't just going to give up, as we see in issue number 2. I mean, they are still the Justice League after all. But just who is in this league? Well, I touched on some of the things that make this team different in terms of their rules and their charter on part 1 of this list. It's now time to focus on not how they are, but who they are, which I also love that issue number 2 dives into a little more in terms of characterization. Wonder Woman is, of course, Yara Flor, not an Amazon in the traditional sense, but from the Amazon. Superman is John Kent. Batman is still Jace, aka Tim Fox. Aquawoman is Princess Andy Curry, daughter of Mera and Aquaman. Jess Chambers of Earth 11 is Flash. And Green Lantern is Joe Mulleen from Far Sector, and by far my favorite member of this league. Although I do also think it's really cool that Jess Chambers is Flash. It's weird. It took me a while to actually piece that one together. I don't know if I'm just some sort of noob, but just realized that recently. Number 4, Detective Chimp. Huge changes afoot for Detective Chimp's character, featured in the additional Justice League Dark story we saw in issue number 1 of Future State Justice League. I was more focused on Justice League in part 1 of this list, so now it's time to get a little dark ourselves on part 2. One of the major changes we see here is that Detective Chimp in the future has become the host for Demon Etrigan himself. Neither party seems to be too happy about that situation, and we don't really find out in this specific story how all this came about or what exactly happened to Jason Blood, but it's definitely a crazy and interesting development. And actually, if you read issue number 2 of that series, you will find out more about that. So if you're wondering where'd Jason Blood go, what's going on, check out issue 2 of Future State Justice League for those answers. Number 3, Cybeast. As I said, we get a combination of Cyborg and Beast in this one, and I really meant that. Very literally. In Teen Titans, it's revealed that the two have merged together and now exist in one shared body. It's pretty freaky, but also in a way, it's really cute and awesome. I love Cyborg and Beast dynamic together as friends and teammates, and I think if anyone had to share a body, they're the chosen few on the team who could actually make that work. And they do make it work pretty well. Number 2, Red X. This might not be a big character change in terms of the actual character themselves, because we don't really know a lot yet, but just the appearance of this character in the comics is a big deal. Red X appeared in the Teen Titans animated series, and the true identity of the character was always a mystery. Like in the story here, we learn that Red X's mask and costume used to be one that belonged to Nightwing, but what we don't know is who is donning it now. Some theorize it could actually be a younger member of the family, perhaps a different Robin, such as Damian Wayne, or that it could be a new character, Bao Pham, aka Clown Hunter, who first appeared during Joker War. Right now, it's unclear, but either way, the appearance of Red X in Future State is huge, regardless of who is under the mask. And yeah, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure in Teen Titans 2 as well, I still don't know who it is. I feel like it's still a mystery. So I guess we're gonna have to wait till Teen Titans Academy. We're going to the Academy to find out. Number 1, Four Horsemen. While Future State initially seemed like it was just a bunch of individual stories, we are now seeing as it progresses that there is more of an overarching and intertwining timeline at play here, with a grander story. Now, not everyone is going to be into that manner of storytelling, but I personally love a good jumbled and mysterious timeline. I love to try to solve it. It's like solving a mystery or like building a puzzle, and I love figuring that all out and just getting a bunch of little pieces. If you feel the same way about this, then one key piece to this puzzle that you'll want to know about is the Four Horsemen. These four end up being defeated by Raven in Teen Titans issue number 2, but have actually made appearances across our timeline. We've seen or felt their presence in Future State comics like Shazam and Flash and Green Lantern, though exactly how they all kind of fit in still remains a bit of a mystery. Of the four, all look familiar, with Wally West, the Flash, who actually has his own tombstone pictured in the Teen Titans series. And if you're thinking, no, Amanda, isn't that Wallace West? No, actually, there is a Wally West tombstone and a Wallace tombstone, so yeah. And also Roundhouse is another one of the Four Horsemen that stuck out to me personally. But these four are definitely all connected to the far reaches of Future State, so keep an eye out if you're trying to build that puzzle by looking at everything. It's a lot to look at, and we're not going to get all the pieces, I don't think, here. We're going to have to go to the other series to find it all out. Number 10, Red Hulk. Thaddeus Ross was always a Hulk villain, but originally he was just an irate military general who believed the Hulk was too great a threat to be allowed to live. He became obsessed with capturing and often killing the Hulk. His obsession only grew more fervent over time, driving him to madness and eventually leading into his transformation from human Hulk nemesis known as General Ross into the villain known as Red Hulk. That's right, his hatred of the Hulk actually ended up leading him to later become like the Hulk, simply in order to get revenge. That is how twisted his mind had become over time, starting as a military general who was originally concerned with national safety, proving that rage can change you and leave you blind to the monster you may be transforming into. Number 9. King Shark. Originally, many believed that King Shark was simply a mutated human. However, it was rumored that King Shark may actually be linked to a being known by some as the Shark God, and this was later added to King Shark's origins and history, making him more than just a bizarre villain who happened to be part shark part man, as he now had mystical origins. His initial character design and appearance in the Superboy comic from the 90s has also changed radically in comparison to how he's often depicted as looking and dressing today, especially in the Harley Quinn animated series. Number 8. Norman Osborn. Norman Osborn has pretty much always been one of Spider-Man's greatest foes over the years, but while he's iconic and steadfast in many ways, he has also gone through a lot of changes just in regards to his own supervillain identities. He also briefly became a sort of bizarre anti-hero who was really still a villain in disguise when he fired the shot broadcast around the world, killing Skrull Queen Veronke, who was impersonating Jessica Drew's Spider-Woman. Killing the Queen of the Skrull Empire granted him hero status and put Norman in charge of his own hero agency, which he named Hammer, which replaced Fury's disbanded SHIELD. He then created and became the leader of his own superhero team composed of villains, known as the Dark Avengers. Number 7. Wally West, the villain. As much as this should be a big change, it seems to be becoming less and less of a surprising one when it comes to Wally's character. It seems DC is obsessed with making Wally West their big bad speed villain. In Future State, we see Wally consumed by a mysterious entity known as Famine. This entity turns Wally against his friends, family, and fellow speedsters, even as they try to help him. Feeding on their speed energy, Wally breaks the connection many of them have to the Speed Force, and even in some cases takes away more than just that. I don't know why DC is obsessed with making fan favorite Wally West become a villain, but as interesting of a change as this is to his character, it's slowly becoming the modern status quo, which kinda ruins it. Also, people don't want to see Wally as a villain. Or most people don't. I don't know. Do you want to see Wally as a villain? Let me know in the comments. Number 6. Jessica Cruz. Jessica has lost her powers! You heard me right. We learned in one of the extra stories included in Future State Green Lantern issue number 1, titled The Taking of Sector 0123, that Jessica Cruz is all alone and powerless in outer space. She still has her ring with her, but is unable to use it. And the rest of that issue actually goes into that a little bit more. And it is alone that she faces a team of Yellow Lanterns who infiltrate the base that she has been guarding, and it is alone that she faces a team of Yellow Lanterns who infiltrate the base that she has been guarding and consistently maintaining all on her own for the past year. And yeah, it's a tech base, not a construct, so yeah. Fortunately for Jessica, she still has her training which she can rely on. She also won't remain without superpowers forever, likely, and you can check out the issue to learn more about what I'm hinting at there. Cruz fans especially should enjoy this story. I personally was like, this is pretty cool. I think it's my favorite one in that book, in the Green Lantern book, issue 1. I don't know. I think so. Number 5. No fraternizing. The new Justice League aren't just here with a new roster, but they also come with new rules as well. The biggest one seems to be that they aren't supposed to get to know each other, hang out, or really fraternize in any way. Heck, they don't even have a headquarters and aren't allowed to actually have any meetings. Say what? We find all this out in issue 1 of Future State Justice League, when John Kent, who is the future Superman, asks his fellow teammates if they would be interested in having a meeting. He acknowledges, however, that it breaks protocol. In fact, this team all seem to be more about doing their own thing than banding together, and often seem to get on one another's nerves. Still, despite it being against the rules, Yara and John seem to have found a bit of common ground, and have formed a friendship outside of the League. Shh, don't tell the League police. Wait, are there League police in the future? And Aquawoman and the Flash have also seemed to form some sort of a relationship. Number 4. Defeat. The league we are introduced to in issue 1 ends up torn asunder pretty quickly in that first issue. Now, I don't want to spoil just how that all goes down because it's honestly, I think it's a pretty neat read in my opinion, but just a reminder to not get too attached to our new team. It seems that their new charter rule of not fraternizing does not necessarily equate to giving them more strength. Here's hoping that this defeat actually might help them to maybe amend that policy in the future and like get rid of that part of the charter. Of course, only time will tell what the Justice League's true fate ends up being. We'll have to wait for issue 2 to find out. I really like this team, so kind of hoping we see some kind of redemption for them at some point. I'm kind of hoping we get to see them like in, present day at some point, because I like them. I think they're cool. Number 3, the Magistrate. Gotham has a new major villain, potentially one of its greatest yet. It faces a force known as the Magistrate, who appear to have been contracted by Gotham's current future mayor, Christopher Nakano, to keep Gotham orderly. In fact, when I heard the Magistrate, I actually thought it was one person, but I don't think it's one person now. And by keep Gotham orderly, I mean impose curfews, shoot masks on sight, and arrest people who are peacefully protesting. I mean, hey, I guess they were out after curfew. The Magistrate's presence can be felt across all Bat-centric and Gotham-centered stories and books, but seems to really loom aloft in Harley Quinn and has a commanding presence in Catwoman, where Selina herself goes up against their forces on a train transporting a ton of the Magistrate's prisoners. Number 2, new Batman. With a new future comes a new Batman, something we haven't seen happen for quite some time in the comics actually. I think the last time we saw someone take up the Bat mantle actually would have been way back when Dick became Batman for a bit. But now, who should be taking over after Batman's mysterious but not actually real death? Jace. Who is Jace? Jace is also known as Tim Fox, Luke's brother. While we don't know very much about Tim as he hasn't been seen for quite some time in the comics, we do know he seems to have some very passionate motivation for taking up the mantle. In this futuristic Gotham too, where tech can easily be tracked and traced, Jace as the next Batman is forced to go without it for the most part, relying on more old school gadgets like his batarangs and his flashbangs. Flashbang. Number 1, new Wonder Woman. Of course, one of the biggest and brightest changes seems to be the addition of Yara Flor, who is seen as the new Wonder Woman in Future State. Yara first appeared in Dark Knight's Death Metal issue number 7, but also has her own Future State comic subtitled Wonder Woman for people to check out. I think I can safely say she's been the most popular of the new characters introduced thus far. Yara herself is not actually from Themyscira, but from the Amazon, so really still an Amazonian when you think about it. Okay, that was a bad joke. Being from the Amazon rainforests of South America, she does not typically work alone, sometimes accompanied thus far by her winged horse Jerry and forest guardian spirit known as Kaipora. I think I said that right, Kaipora. I love Kaipora's look, by the way. I feel like I really want to do a Kaipora cosplay. Let me know what y'all think. Number 10, Mr. Sinister. While we might not have originally been aware of the changes Mr. Sinister went through to begin with, we would later on learn more about the villain and in so doing, learn about all the great changes that Nathaniel Essex originally went through to become Mr. Sinister. Sinister was created following Essex's turning to the dark side, becoming BFFs and partners with Apocalypse and allowing Apocalypse to help Mr. Sinister evolve into the best, most freaky looking version of himself. Since we've come to know Sinister, he's also died at the hands of Rogue and would later return as a bunch of different fail-safe clone versions of himself, including the iconic genetic virus implanted clone Miss Sinister, which would later allow him to be reborn as a mutant officially. Number 9, Apocalypse. Apocalypse is a villain who's kind of all about change, as that's kind of his mutant ability. And Sabin Nur discovered that evolution was his ability, and it is this power that kept him so strong and feared throughout time. That, and he also allowed himself to be altered by celestial technology. But not just his power levels and appearance have evolved over time. Apocalypse has also recently turned over a new leaf, joining his mutant brothers and sisters on the mutant nation and island known as Krakoa. There he begrudgingly works alongside his former enemies, even if he does often consider them to be still weaker than him. Still, he has fully embraced the ideals of Krakoa, even changing his name. He no longer goes by Apocalypse, but by, well, however you say this in Krakoan. In fact, he actually created his own name in Krakoan, as these symbols don't adhere to what we know of the Krakoan alphabet this far. I'm really hoping that someone at Marvel will start up a crash course in how to speak Krakoan, because I know how to read it, but how to speak it remains a mystery. And I still don't know exactly what Apocalypse's Krakoan name is. Though I assume it's something similar, but in Krakoan? Number 8. Kite Man. Kite Man was originally known as a B-list or even a C-list villain. Chuck Brown's Kite Man was actually a character inspired by Charlie Brown, who also had an affinity for kites. His original origins was simply that he was a kite-obsessed kid who grew up to become a kite-obsessed supervillain, belonging to Batman's gallery of rogues. However, when his character was reintroduced as part of the New 52, he was given a more tragic backstory of losing his son to a poisoned kite string, caught up in the war between Joker and the Riddler due to being the creator of Joker's Jokermobile and getting involved with Batman. It's a really hard time for Kite Man there. The death of his son caused him to become a villain and later somewhat of a hero, who is known as Kite Man. We've also gotten a relatively more humorous version of the villain, with more of a throwback to and play on his original C-lister status in the Harley Quinn animated series. However, the depiction of Kite Man in the Harley Quinn series has actually also led us to seeing a resurgence of his popularity, or has just allowed him to become popular, because I'm not sure if Kite Man ever had that before. Were people fans of Kite Man before the Harley Quinn animated series? Put up your hand if you were there before in the comments. Number 7. Cheetah. We have just had so many cheetahs over the years and so many different origins for this character. Cheetah is a legacy Wonder Woman villain who went from being Priscilla Rich, a jealous debutante who was envious of Wonder Woman and as such became obsessed with opposing her as a hate-filled supervillain, to Barbara Minerva, an archaeologist who was actually once a good friend of Wonder Woman until she was captured and given superpowers by the plant god Urzkartaga, hopefully I'm saying that right, which allowed her to become part cheetah, part human creature. Barbara became an enemy of Wonder Woman not because she was jealous, but because she blamed Diana for not saving her. Yikes. Number 6. Galactus. Even with Galactus' origins, there was a lot of change going on with him from the beginning of his story. Just in his transition from alien humanoid and explorer Galen to the powerhouse that we know as Galactus. But while Galactus has been painted as a villain in the past, he also became understood as more of a neutral figure over time, with us even learning that although Galactus' insane power levels and hunger caused him to need to devour whole planets, he actually was a cosmic force that was needed when it came to maintaining balance in the cosmos. Basically, Galactus is a necessary evil. For a time though, he even moved from being more of a villain or neutral figure to actually being good, becoming the Life Bringer, a being who, instead of devouring planets and feeding on their energy, had the desire to recreate planets, including restoring the lost life and lost worlds that he had previously devoured. Of course, now he's back to being Galactus, so. Number 5. Killer Frost. Killer Frost is a mantle that has been both associated with villains and heroes in DC Comics. One of the more notable characters to use the moniker was Dr. Caitlin Snow, a researcher who found her body had become merged with ice following an accident with a coolant system during a time when she was frantically trying to escape former colleagues who were revealed to be villains who wanted her dead. This transformation caused her to become a heat vampire, draining heat from others in order to survive. She could also produce and control ice spikes and harm others with her intensely icy touch. Caitlin Snow has been a hero on a few occasions, but she has also been a villain on a few occasions as well, often changing back and forth and flip-flopping between the two. Similar to Morbius, her main purpose is seeking a cure to her condition, and her alignment often depends on which hero or villain best suits this purpose. Number 4. Joker. So you might be surprised to see Joker on this list. After all, there are some characters here who have changed from the side of villain to hero, which to some might be considered a bigger change than anything we've seen from the consistently villainous character known as Joker. However, I would argue that just because his alignment has not changed much doesn't mean that his approach to crime hasn't changed a lot. The Joker originally was introduced 80 years ago as a very dark and sinister clown, murderous certainly, but not quite as violent, shocking, or horrific as he is now. There have also been various spins and takes on this character when it comes to the Joker's philosophy in regards to why crime and Batman are just so important to him. Over time, he's become much more obsessive, and his character has become more and more about pushing the limits when it comes to just how shocking and terrible his schemes can be. Just how much can the Joker push the envelope? How much can he shock or scare you? Originally, there was no real desire or need for the Joker to do this, by the way, in the comics. He kinda just did stuff because he wanted to. He used to be more about the action, and now he seems to be more about the reaction. It's all about a rise he can get out of you. I bet if you never reacted to the Joker, he would actually get super bored of being a villain to you. Number 3, Emma Frost. So many of the mutants, it feels like, are having their evolutions highlighted in the newest mutant line, Dawn of X, and this in no way excludes everyone's favorite telepathic villain turned hero, Emma Frost. Emma's changes really came from her passion as a teacher. Simply put, Emma was never an explicit villain in the comics. It was never really that simple for her. She's always been a more complex character, but for the sake of this list, we're going to consider her early on actions and feuds with the X-Men enough to refer to her as an X-Men villain, at least in the beginning. What we saw with Emma, however, was that even when she was in conflict with the X-Men team, she always seemed to admire and respect them somewhat. And it was this respect for Xavier's ability as a teacher that caused her to reconsider her own alignment, and her desire to be the best teacher possible for her students that inspired her to join Xavier and eventually the X-Men team, becoming more and more of a hero with each appearance as time went on, and as she also got closer to team leader Cyclops, aka Scott Summers. Number 2, Poison Ivy. Ivy herself has done a complete 180 since her initial introduction in the comics. She was originally a villain who used pheromones to seduce Batman, pining after him, and was painted as an eco-terrorist who put plant life before human life, often believing that humans needed to be exterminated. Since she was first introduced, Poison Ivy has actually moved closer towards becoming a hero, even starting to see that humans might not be as awful as she originally thought, and learning to tolerate and even form friendships with them through her bond with Harley Quinn. These two have actually proven to both be a huge part of contributing to the other's evolution, something that also often rings true in most people's everyday life. Many people learn and grow through the relationships that they form with others, giving us all a greater understanding of one another and the world around us. Number 1, Venom. Venom and Eddie Brock are probably the characters who have both undergone the most change together since their first introduction in the comics. It has honestly been a joy to read their growth and transition from supervillain to reluctant anti-hero to full-on anti-hero and even sometimes full-on hero. The symbiote we often refer to as Venom itself has had many partners over the years that it is bonded with, but it's safe to say that for better or for worse, Eddie Brock is the one who has inspired the most change in the symbiote, and the same could be said for the symbiote's influence on its main host, Brock himself.